We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
This Side of the Grave is the 5th book in Jeaniene Frost's urban fantasy paranormal romance series, the Night Huntress series. The Night Huntress books are very well reviewed and have consistently been rated as some of the best in the genre. Though we've been on this journey with Cat and Bones for 4 books, Frost does not relent in this 5th book. Filled with passion, romance, and enjoyable characters, This Side of the Grave packs a 1-2 punch of fun and emotions. In this book, we see our characters struggle a little bit. The journey has been long, so quite naturally, our characters have not only evolved individually, but we also get to see their dynamic change notably. When we first meet back up with Cat and Bones, it has been quite a bit of time since the events of Destined for an Early Grave, almost a year in fact. But while vampire life remains eventful for the pair and their friends, the two lovers have settled into their relationship and continue to grow their emotional bond and connection quite literally. They have found some sort of balance between both of their strong wills that doesn't seem to make Cat run in the other direction, which she is notorious for. And ever since the last book, when Bones finally turned Cat into a vampire, they've shared a connection to one another that only makes them more in sync, not just in their movements during battle, but it has also brought a sort of ease to their romantic relationship that I thought was missing in the previous books. The most pressing matters in their relationship is that Bones is teaching Cat to fly, with little success. And that unexpectedly, Cat does not feed like normal vampires. Ever since turning, she has been repulsed by human blood and can only receive sustenance from vampire blood. They are trying to keep Cat's feeding habits under wraps, so she is primarily feeding on Bones for nutrition. However, she absorbs the powers of vampires she feeds on. In the last book, we saw that after feeding on Vlad, Cat absorbed some of his pyro powers. And in the last several months, she's also fed on Mencaries, gaining his telekinesis power. Feeding on Bones specifically has the side effect of mind reading for Cat, and getting bombarded by human thoughts proved to be somewhat difficult for our Red Reaper. Nonetheless, when we meet back up with the two, they are investigating a string of vampire disappearances that have been a bit too consistent to be deemed a coincidence. Cat, who is used to doling out justice to vampires who pose a threat to humanity, has now found herself looking into the disappearances of masterless vampires. Masterless vampires in the undead world were fair game, open season to any vampire or ghoul trying to make a name for themselves. Vampires with no masters to protect them have been disappearing or turning up shriveled, and our vampire heroes learn very early on in this book that it has a lot to do with the ghouls. During the events of Destined for an Early Grave, Cat thought that she quelled the rumors that she was going to become a vampire-ghoul hybrid by becoming a full vampire. She thought that she quelled the idea that she was either going to bring about the end of the ghouls or subdue them all and turn them into a slave race. But Cat was wrong. One of the most notable ghoul leaders in the nation, Apollyon, has been rallying fanatic ghouls all over the country to his side, spreading his message that it's not enough to end Cat's life. There has to be an all-out war, ghouls against vampires, at the end of which Cat would be executed as a message that ghouls are the dominant race. Turns out, this isn't the first time he spread this rhetoric. Long ago, during the 15th century in fact, there was another human vampire half-breed who also made a name for herself during this time. Her name was Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was conceived much like Cat. One of her parents must have been a newly turned vampire who at the time of Joan's conception still produced reproductive cells before their bodily functions as a human completely ceased. During the 15th century, Apollyon rallied his kind behind this same rhetoric that for vampires, all roads lead to subjugating ghouls. But much to his dismay, Joan's premature death stopped his chances for an all-out vampire-ghoul war. Now, though, Apollyon sees Cat as the perfect opportunity to incite war again. He just had to spread his message and infect as many ghouls with his message as he can. Needless to say, Cat and Bones take this threat seriously. So much so that they send one of Cat's old colleagues and friend, Dave, deep undercover into the ghoul community to learn more. Dave, who was turned into a ghoul after having his throat pulled out on the job 2 years ago, was relatively unknown in the ghoul world. Dave was smart, strong, capable, and already dead. So Dave was now on leave from the government and was headed to Memphis with Fabian in order to gather information. Fabian, who was 45 when he died, was a ghost and one of Cat's closest friends, which was saying a lot. Ghosts were not generally respected in the supernatural community. In fact, they were largely ignored by ghouls and vampires alike. Cat, never conforming to the rules, made a friend in Fabian during the events of Destined for an Early Grave. Cat saw past his non-corporeal form. She treated him like a person, earning not only his friendship, but his loyalty. Fabian would streamline information between Memphis and wherever Cat would be using ghost ley lines. Ghost ley lines are like highways for ghosts. They can ride the magnetic energy that can carry them long distances very quickly. Let's call them invisible bullet trains for ghosts. While Dave was in place in Memphis, Cat and Bones paid a visit to the queen of the New Orleans ghouls, the voodoo queen, majestic Marie Laveau. If they can get her on their side instead of Apollyon's side, Marie would be a powerful ally. Not only was she the master of a large line of ghouls, she ruled over the entire city of New Orleans. Apollyon, on the other hand, assumes that because Marie's sire Gregor is now dead, Marie would have to ally herself with her people. He thinks that because Marie is the ghoul queen of Orleans, Marie would never stand by Cat's side against her people if an all-out war was to break out. Marie Laveau, who at the time of her death 150 years ago, was a practitioner of voodoo, a voodoo priestess, a mambo. In her sect, Mambos would drink blood sprinkled with the voodoo god Zombie's essence to absorb the god's powers over the dead temporarily, to command the grave. Those powers became permanent upon her death and continue to grow. Marie, turning into a ghoul after death, commands this Mambo magic. It's as though she no longer practiced black magic. She was black magic. And she seemed to be privy to how Cat was getting her newfound powers and sustenance. Marie Laveau is no stranger to Cat and Bones. In fact, Cat and Marie are somewhat on good terms. Their relationship, if can be described as any, was filled with respect and peppered with dark humor shared between the two women. During their meeting, the lovers learned much about Marie and her connection to grave magic. And although Cat doesn't know it at the time, Marie gives her what she needs to fight Apollyon and end his uprising. Yes, Marie is a ghoul, but as we learned during the events of the previous book, Marie was not opposed to aligning herself with vampires, if it was in her best interest. So that's what Marie did. She aligns herself with Cat, not by making a stance filled with bravado, not by rallying her New Orleans ghouls against Apollyon, but by secretly feeding Cat some of her blood during that meeting. Marie would not openly support Cat simply out of race loyalty. The interests of ghouls are her best interests, believe it or not. Even if she is against Apollyon and his bigoted beliefs, openly aligning herself with Cat would start a ghoul civil war. And with all the venom Apollyon has been spewing while in hiding, it would no doubt cause the vampires to swoop in and retaliate while the ghouls were most vulnerable during their infighting. No, she would not openly stand against Apollyon, but she would feed Cat some of that blood. Feeding Cat this blood gave Cat the ability to wield grave magic. Cat can now call what Marie describes as remnants to her defense by spilling her own blood. Remnants, slivers of the most primal emotions left over after someone crosses over, feed from energy and pain. Once Cat calls the remnants to her aid, They will attack the source of her ire relentlessly, painfully. Not even the 4,000-year-old Menkeres is a match for them. But it's not only the ferocious remnants and wraiths that Cat now has a connection to. She is now somewhat of a homing beacon to all ghosts. It started with the ghosts that followed them from New Orleans. To the surprise of Cat and Bones, ghosts from all over felt this connection to Cat. Cat treats all the ghosts she encounters with much respect, like she treats Fabian. Besides, they are more than just phantoms, and their plight is not easy. To overcome not only death, but existing between worlds, neither living nor undead, to be left behind by all who cross over, unable to communicate with loved ones you've left behind, while being largely ignored by the only ones who can see you, treated like vermin, even though they are no more alive than you are. With Fabian's help, Cat and her companions understand more about what it was like to be a ghost. While her relationship with Bones seems less tumultuous than I've ever witnessed it, her familial life has been rocky to say the least. And destined for an early grave, Cat's mother, Jeaniene, was turned into a vampire to much shock, not just to me, but to Cat and Jeaniene as well. Jeaniene carried such hatred for vampires all of Cat's life. No one could have guessed that becoming a vampire was her fate. From the moment Cat was a little girl, she had to deal with her mother's hatred for vampires, which trickled down to Cat in the form of resentment. Her mother never forgot to remind Cat of the evil that Jeaniene believed resided within her, the monster that was lingering within Cat. But now, Jeaniene has become what some would say was the bane of her own existence. How does Jeaniene deal with becoming a vampire? By joining Cat's old squad. Cat used to work for a covert branch of Homeland Security who protected humans beyond what the normal law could, by protecting them against rogue vampires. And now, Jeaniene worked for them, which worried Cat. Vampires may be hard to kill, but they were still killable. Her mother aside, Cat has to deal with her uncle, Don Williams, dying. Her mother now being a vampire meant that her uncle was her only living relative left. Don has been dying of lung cancer for 7 years, it seems. The only thing that's kept him alive this long is that he has been feeding himself bits of vampire blood, enough to keep him strong and fighting the good fight, but not enough to stop his lungs from sustaining further damage, not enough to cure him or save him, it seems. Regardless, Don did not want to live past what he was supposed to. He was ready to die. Unfortunately for Cat, she has to respect his wishes, despite the fact that she felt as though they were just becoming close. Despite the feelings of love that she now felt for her uncle, she had to come to grips with letting him go, forever. And she did not know that she could do that. Cat isn't the only one contending with their feelings. Don has to contend with feelings of regret on his deathbed. Regret that he waited so long to make Cat a part of his life. Regret that they did not get a chance to spend time together unless he was sending her on these life-threatening missions. Although Don will never have a chance to walk Cat down the aisle, on his deathbed, surrounded by Cat, Tate, Bones, and Jeaniene, Don gave Cat away just as he took his last breath. The operation was now left to Tate Bradley. Cat was in a lot of pain. Grieving for her uncle consumed her to the point that she didn't give the issue of Apollyon much thought for a while. It was not until she thought back to her encounter with the remnants and Marie, and in that moment she knew what Marie was trying to tell her and why she ultimately fed Cat her blood. She then remembered Marie Laveau asking her if she ever wondered how Gregor escaped from Menkeres prison to pursue Cat during the events of Destined for an Early Grave. It was Gregor's vampire blood that raised Marie as a ghoul. So, as her sire, she was loyal to him, bound to him. So she searched for him during the 12 years Menkeres had him imprisoned, using her ghosts. Her ghosts scoured the earth until they found Gregor in a dungeon in remote Madagascar. Turns out, Marie gave Cat what she needed all along to find Apollyon and bring him to justice. Cat found the power she needed within her to summon ghosts. In this world, Blood summoned the remnants, while tears summoned ghosts. Once she summoned as many ghosts as she could, dozens upon dozens, she enlisted their help in finding Apollyon. Like General Patton to his troops, Cat gives orders for them to ride the ley lines, to scour the country, and find Apollyon, which they are able to do in less than a week. Cat and her friends gear up for an ambush now that they have a location, date, and time for Apollyon's next rally. They crash the rally and make light work of Apollyon and his ghoul followers in attendance. Aside from getting their location, Cat did not need to use her grave powers courtesy of Marie. No. Her and her friends storm the cemetery and go blow for blow with the 60 gathered ghouls. Cat fights side by side with Bones, Ian, Spade, Kira, Mencaries, Vlad, Gorgon, Veritas, and even Denise, who is now an immortal shapeshifter due to her being branded by a demon. We see our girl Cat in full-blown Reaper glory. While her friends cut through the ranks of the ghouls, Cat herself is doing her thing expertly in an attempt to get to Apollyon. Removing the heads of ghoul after ghoul, one swift motion after the next, it was not long before Apollyon was captured and the rest of the ghouls surrendered in defeat. The ghouls and vampires all watch as Apollyon tries to throw himself at Veritas' feet. Sniveling and begging, he hopes that she, being a vampire law guardian, would spare him the wrath of Cat. He hopes for a fair trial. But Veritas has no intention of giving Apollyon a fair trial. You see, Joan of Arc was her friend. Why would she grant him asylum when time and time again he shows his hatred for her people, for vampires? It was time for Apollyon to suffer for what he has done in the 15th century and what he tried to do again in the 21st century. In fact, Veritas sentenced him to death right then and there. In the end, Apollyon died a coward's death, scrambling, running, and begging to the bitter end. The ghouls watched as their disgraced leader met his demise, their hopes for a ghoul uprising over. To everyone's surprise, the night didn't end there. Marie Laveau makes her entrance just then. She puts her power on full display while she speaks on behalf of her people. Remnants surrounding her and her people, she brokers peace between the ghouls and vampires moving forward. She now leads all the ghouls, and while she was their leader, she wanted peace. She assured her ghouls that peace did not mean vampires would rule over them, because for as long as she lived, the ghoul nation would be equal in power to that of the vampires. The wall of remnants that went as far as the edges of the cemetery and higher than the trees assured that both sides, vampires and ghouls, saw this. Threatening remnants aside, not even Veritas could deny this deal. They may not be sure where Marie's loyalties lie, but only time will tell if they can trust the Queen of Ghouls. Marie leaves the cemetery with her ghouls, while Cat and her friends deal with the cleanup. Corpses in various states of decomposition littered the cemetery, because when vampires and ghouls die, their bodies decompose to their true age. So in order for the existence of supernatural creatures to remain a secret, cleanup was essential. But before the story ends here for my girl Cat, Don, her uncle, shows himself to her. It turns out, Don did not yet cross over like she expected him to when he died. He was now a ghost. To help Don cross over, Cat tells him that it's okay. He does not have to watch over her anymore. It was safe for him to cross over, to finally be on the other side. They say their goodbyes, and then Don disappears. Unfortunately for Don, he does not stay gone, and he has one question for Cat. Why the hell is he still here?